Welcome to the complete guide to Warrior 3, Virabhadrasana 3. Today we are going to dive into the anatomy, biomechanics, and our favorite variations of this classic yoga pose. I'm Jenny and this is Travis, and we are the co-founders of Strength for Yoga, where we teach yogis how to strength train, specifically with an asana focus. So where should we start, Travis?
So let's start by talking about just the anatomy of the pose,
Yeah,
right?
and maybe I should show it, right?
That's a helpful idea.
Like
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
So what do we see here? Well, we're first of all standing on one leg, right? And usually the hands are just in prayer,
Oh, yeah,
or maybe at the,
but they could be forward.
yeah.
That's kind of common. Is
Yeah.
my foot going to hit you?
Nope.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, they could be
Like that.
forward, they could be backward.
They could be like this.
Oh, wow. I've never even seen that one before.
Yeah,
But the main work is happening at the hip.
that's right.
So,
The standing leg.
yeah. The standing leg is going into a position of hip flexion. And usually the knee is, I would say, micro bend. Would you say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, yeah.
Yeah. So the knee is towards straight, but maybe a slight bend. So we're in a position of hip flexion on the working leg. We are also in a position of neutral hip rotation.
Right. We're not like
Because the hips are
external
square to
or
the floor, or at least we're aspiring to a neutral hip rotation by keeping the hips square to the floor. I think
yeah.
a lot of times people have a tendency to allow that hip to open up, like almost towards a half moon. Not
Right.
fully, but so what we want to do is try to keep the hips square to the floor in neutral rotation and keep the hips in a neutral position of abduction or adduction.
That's right. That's right.
So that's the working leg, and what the muscles that would be active on
Yeah.
that working leg would
Which muscles?
mostly be the hamstrings. So the muscles on the backs of our thighs are the ones that are getting stretched and they're on tension to maintain that position.
Right. They're loaded somewhat.
Somewhat,
Here, the
yeah,
hamstrings.
yeah. They're the glutes might be
And the
getting a little
glutes.
bit of work as well. They also work to extend the hip. And the hip abductors would be working to control that pelvic position in the frontal and perhaps transverse plane.
Because there's maybe a tendency to like have the hips like shift off, right?
Yep. Yep. So they're working well, everything's working isometrically when we're holding
Right.
the pose.
But like these are,
Yeah. And then maybe the other thing to point out is what the trail leg is doing.
yeah, the lifted
So
one.
the lifted leg is in a position of hip extension.
Is it
It's not extended past neutral. It's extended to neutral.
That's right. It's neutral, but the hip extensors are working, right?
That is correct. Yep.
Because like if these guys were not working, this would
Yeah.
happen. So these
Yep.
work.
So again, the hamstrings and glutes are actually working on the back leg to
Yeah.
maintain that position and not allow the leg to drop towards the floor.
That's right. And like one other, I think, pretty small biomechanical detail is maybe thinking about the thoracic extensors.
Yeah.
So
So
like
the
the
whole spine is working to
actually really all, yeah, not just thoracic.
to maintain a neutral position. So the extensors are working.
Right.
The lumbar extensors, the thoracic extensors are working to prevent you from rounding forward.
Yeah, because if they weren't working, then I would be like this.
Yeah.
But all of this works to hold
Yep.
me here.
Yep. Isometrically. It's isometric extension of the trunk extensors, the muscles on the back of the spine to maintain that neutral position.
That's right. That's awesome. So I think we pretty thoroughly covered anatomy in terms of joint position and then
Like that was
biomechanics.
the trunk and the lower body. Of course,
yeah, the arms.
different things could be happening with the arms, but
That's a little,
yeah, we don't need to worry about that.
that's right. And also kind of in its classic,
Not much
it's
is
just like
happening
this.
here,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if that's kind of establishing what's going on biomechanically, should we turn to our favorite Warrior 3 variations?
Let's do that.
Because we have how many? 9.
We have nine
have 9
variations
of
for
them.
you today. So the first one, we're going to use a resistance band. And we like this big, well, actually, this requires a loop resistance band because
Oh, that's right.
Jenny steps onto the band and then puts the band over her shoulder like a backpack. And she does her Warrior 3. And so the band is really cool because it creates this awareness, this tactile or proprioceptive sensation of trying to create length through the band. So from the heel
Yeah.
all the way to the shoulder, it connects the shoulder to the heel, which is just nice because you're supposed to be tipping like a seesaw forward and backward. As the torso comes forward, the leg comes back. And so we can feel that through that connection of the band.
That's so true. It's that, yeah, I really feel that as I do it.
Awesome.
So that's our first
That is number
favorite
one.
variation.
Yeah. Variation number 2 is a sliding variation that we'll use a yoga blanket for. So if you didn't have a blanket, you could use a towel or a furniture slider or anything that would slide. And so with this variation, Jenny starts by pushing the blanket back, and then she finishes by tipping forward into Warrior 3 and then returns to the start or reverses it.
Right.
So it's subtly different than the Warrior 3 without the blanket, because Jenny isn't fully tipping forward. She's kind of pushing back.
Yeah.
And then once she gets to her edge by feeling a stretch through the hamstrings, that's when she lifts up the trail leg.
I feel like it's helpful too, especially for maybe balance challenged, because you can just keep the foot down and then slide, like you're guided back.
So otherwise you're picking the foot up immediately and you're on one leg.
Yeah.
This, you only get to one leg at the very end. So it is nice because if you were feeling unstable or like you were about to lose balance, you could just put that back foot down.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So you spend less time on one leg. The next variation uses, we're using a yoga mat, but you could also use a foam roller that's the same size. So this kind of does the same thing as the band, where it connects the upper body to the lower body. So Jenny pushes down into the mat and the mat is on top of her foot. And so now she has that connection where as she pushes through, that keeps the leg long, it keeps the torso long, and we get that seesaw action from shoulder to heel.
I really like this one. And I feel, because I just did it, you just did the resistance band one. With the band, I was like pushing into it.
Yeah.
But here, I actually have to kind of push up, like pull in, like hug in
Oh, so
in
you
order
get
to
to
keep
pull the toes up
Yeah.
and push down. Which
Yeah,
is
so
a
the
little
mat is
different
like
because the other
this.
one was reaching.
Yeah, so just like slightly different energetically.
Cool.
But this is really, I like it.
Nice. So our next two variations actually use a broom or a dowel, just a
In case
stick.
you were wondering why there was a broom in the background.
No, we're just
hanging out.
sweeping up. So the first version will have the broom on the spine. So Jenny has her one arm in internal rotation, the bottom arm, and her top arm in external rotation. And she's trying to maintain 3 points of contact at her head, her upper back, and her sacrum or tailbone. So again, that creates this length where if she were to make a mistake of rounding through the back, then the broom would come off of the tailbone. But she knows that she's doing the pose correctly because she maintains those 3 points of contact.
It helps me keep like a neutral spine, right? And another tendency might be to arch away from it. When you're coming in, like, sometimes Warrior 3, where we kind of extend the spine a little much.
Like overarch.
Yeah. And not that it's a bad thing, but whatever. It's just it's not neutral, but this helps you feel that you're not doing that.
Yep. And it also
staying
is nice
connected.
because it makes sure that your neck is
yeah.
staying in line with the rest of the torso.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
The second broomstick option we call the scarecrow because, I don't know, Wizard of Oz.
Looks like a scarecrow.
Yeah.
They have their arms.
Yes, that is why.
I think
And so this is really cool because it necessitates or
Oh, yeah.
it constrains your upper body to be in that extended
right.
posture. So you're pulling in and the broomstick is pulling you back into thoracic extension, and then you do your Warrior 3.
Yes.
And
Scarecrow.
you cannot round.
Yeah.
Because the broom is preventing you from doing so.
Precisely. So those are our two broom or dowel moves.
Yep. Our next option uses a yoga block. You could actually also use a broom for this, but the block takes up a little less space. So this is called the reaching Warrior 3. So what we do here is we just reach the block forward. The block has a little bit of weight into it so that it acts as a bit of a counterbalance, but it's also just the sensation of trying to reach forward, which then the opposite action hopefully occurs of reaching back with the leg, and it creates that length.
That's right. It's great.
So like we would be doing that anyway without the block, but it just gives us something objective in the world to reach forward as opposed to
Right.
just reaching the hands.
Something we can like feel and yeah, I like that.
Our next option uses a kettlebell, and this is
Held like
called,
this, right?
yep, the Bulgarian goat bag swing variation for those keeping score. Jenny pulls the kettlebell into her belly button, and so this is nearly the same as the scarecrow, but it's actually the opposite thing that's going on because she's having to pull in, whereas the scarecrow broom put her into that position. But by pulling in, she has to, there's force that's wanting to round her. So she has to act against that to maintain extension. And just there's that sensation of like as you push in, it flexes the hips, which is really cool.
Yeah, totally. To me, it's like another tactile one where it helps me sense that
Yep,
hip hinge.
there's the tactile as well as there's actual resistance that's trying to bring you out of the position that you have to
Right. There's
fight
both.
against to maintain the position. Our next
This is our
variation,
8th out of 9,
second to
right?
last, yeah, is the foot on wall. So with this variation, Jenny just sets up a few feet from the wall or the leg length, her leg
Right.
length
One
away from
leg
the wall,
length.
so that when she gets into the pose, her foot is on the wall. She has a little bit more stability there, and she can hold this nice shape.
I can really push like through my leg into the
Oh
wall and
yeah.
then reach forward through the crown of my head just a little more.
Mm-hmm.
You also can feel and sense where your leg is in space a little better rather than just like in the middle of the room. You
Right.
have something concrete.
Totally.
So that's a good one as well. And are we ready for our very last?
Yes, our very last, maybe our favorite of
And
all.
maybe our favorite at Strength 3 Yoga?
We did use a kettlebell already for the goat
This
one,
one. Hmm.
but this one is actually just a loaded Warrior 3. In the strength training world, we call this a single leg deadlift or a single leg stiff legged deadlift or a single leg Romanian deadlift. It goes by many names, but it is just a loaded Warrior 3 where we transition into and out. So we go from standing to Warrior 3 back to standing for repetitions. And this is really cool because now this kettlebell is adding, in this case, 20 pounds of resistance against, pulling Jenny into the pose, which she has to eccentrically control. And then she has to concentrically use the hamstrings and glutes and all those other muscles that we talked about before to stand back up. And that is going to create a potent strengthening stimulus where if you did maybe 3 sets of 10 reps with the weight, you would probably feel that the next day in a way that you might not if you just practiced Warrior 3 on the mat with body weight.
Just body weight. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Adding the load, that kind of stuff is what we extra love to do in Strength for Yoga.
That's right.
So that's why we wanted to include it as one of our favorite variations. So did we cover everything we wanted to cover today?
I think we did. That concludes our complete guide to Warrior 3.
And if you appreciated this content, subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on all the tips that I/we share.